to A Fistful of Dice. I'm Matt, and today on Tabletop Tales, we're going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons, Satan's Game. So most everyone knows that at one point in D&D's history, and gaming's history in general, there was sort of this stigma that it was like satanic or evil. That kids playing it were unable to discern fantasy from reality, and they were becoming involved in the occult, carrying out demonic rituals, sacrificing goats, eating babies, that sort of stuff. Of course, it's all junk. D&D doesn't make kids into Satanists. If a kid is troubled and has emotional problems, they have emotional problems. D&D does not sway them either way. So, this was mostly a thing like in the 70s and 80s because there was a few cases of kids who happened to play D&D committing suicide and becoming involved in some shady things. And of course, the fact that they happened to play D&D was completely coincidental. But I sort of thought that sort of idea that D&D was satanic was an old idea that no one really held anymore. I mean, it's harmless. It's a bunch of nerds sitting around a table rolling some dice. Who cares? If anything, it's good for younger people to be playing D&D. It teaches social skills, arithmetic, problem solving, teamwork, creative thinking, imagination. I'm going to do a video on this, but I'm a big advocate of kids playing Dungeons & Dragons and games like it. But, so let's get into the story. I used to work at a board game store in my hometown. And it was really the only board game store probably within 50 miles. We sold all sorts of games, your typical board games like Monopoly, but we also sold like Euro games like Catan and Agricola, Fantasy Flight games, war games. We sold Warhammer stuff, card games. Card games were probably our biggest seller. Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, things like that. We also sold a lot of puzzles, which was a big draw. And, of course, we sold tabletop RPG materials. Me and one other guy who worked at the store were pretty much the only ones who played tabletop RPGs regularly. So we were sort of delegated to whenever someone had a question about D&D or any of the games, we were sort of the go-to people for those questions. And I enjoyed it. I liked talking to people about this thing that I loved so much. And one time, I'd probably been working there for about a year. This little kid came in, and he's by himself. And he goes over, and I was working by myself at the time. The store was completely empty except for me and this kid. And, he was probably 10 or 11. Yeah, 10 or 11. I'm a bad judge of age, but he was, pretty mature kid for his age. And he's just kind of quiet, and he's looking around at stuff, and I'm just sort of, keeping an eye on him, making sure he's not, doing kid stuff like pouring paint on things, which happened. That's a story for later. He's behaving himself. He's just looking at the games and stuff, and he goes over to the D&D books. And technically, we had a 15-minute read limit on the D&D books, but it was just me and this kid. I'm not going to be there. Hey, you can only read books for 15 minutes, But he's over there kind of looking at the books, and I see him kind of picking up some 4th edition stuff and some 3.5 stuff, and he's kind of just flipping through stuff and reading it. And I decide I'm going to go over and talk to him. So I kind of walk over, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? How's your day going? And he's like, hey, I'm good. And he goes, what is this? I've heard about this. And I go, well, it's Dungeons and Dragons. And he's like, what do you do? Like, I don't understand. How do you play it? And I start talking to him about it. And I'm like, well, basically, it's an adventure game. I say, do you play video games? And he said, yeah. And I go, do you ever play, like, Oblivion or anything like that? And I think he had played, or I said, have you ever played Zelda? And he was like, yeah, I played Zelda. I go, well, it's kind of like that, you make a character, and you go through adventures with your friends, and you acquire items and gold and experience, and your character gets better and better, and you fight bigger and bigger things and solve harder and harder puzzles and things like that. And You know, I could tell it still wasn't quite clicking for him. And he was like, "What do you mean you build a character?" You know, he thought, you know, like Legos, and I'm telling him, no, like you write it on paper. It's all done in, you know, in your head basically with pen and paper and dice. And he was just so intrigued by this concept. And I said here, and I grabbed the Pathfinder core rulebook, and I said, you know, come over to the front counter. I'll walk you through making a character. It's like a Monday afternoon. Yeah, it's like 3. There's no one in the store. I'm like, I'm gonna help this kid out because, you know, it seems like he's genuinely interested in this hobby. So I take him over to the counter. I grab some printer paper and a pencil and some dice, and I walk him through making a character. And I do it very simply. You know, I ask him, you know, what kind of characters do you like? Do you like big, strong guys? Do you like quick, nimble people? Do you like to do magic? You know, what kind of stuff do you like? I think he ended up wanting to make a fighter because he really liked like sword and shield type guys. So we start going through, and he's kind of, you know, like not really getting it at first, but it sort of starts clicking in his mind how this is working and what we're doing. And you know, I let him roll his abilities and come up with, you know, what his character can do and stuff. And I'm sort of talking to him about it. And we're probably about halfway through the character creation process. And he's just loving it. He's loving it. And at this point, his dad comes in looking for him. And he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the kid goes, "We're playing Dungeons and Dragons." And I'm like, yeah, you know, he was kind of interested in the book, so I'm just kind of walking him through, you know, how the game is played, basically. And the dad gets this look on his face, like, did I hear you correctly? And he goes, what are you doing? The kid goes, it's Dungeons and Dragons, Dad. And the dad goes, oh, you don't need to be playing that. He walks up, closes the book, and like pushes it back towards me, gives me the dirtiest look. Like, how dare you? Grabs his kid, not roughly or anything, but grabs his kid and basically is like, we're leaving. The kid's like, but Dad, you know, it's blah, 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 blah. And the dad's like, you don't want to play that game. You know, that's not good stuff. He said, that's not good. And left. And I'm just sitting there like, with this poor kid's like half-made character and the Pathfinder core rulebook, all by myself, just like, what the hell just happened? And I could not... It completely caught me off guard. Like, this guy could have responded in many different ways, and he chose the worst possible way. He could have been like, oh, D&D, huh? You're into that? You know, like, are you sure? You want to, you know, I've heard some weird things about that. Are you sure you're into that? Which, you know, would have been fine. Or he could have been like, oh, you like D&D? Oh, cool. You know, I used to play it. We should get a starter kit and run an adventure, which would have been the best answer. Instead, without asking any questions or trying to learn more about what's happening here, he just closes the book, tells the kid that what he's doing is bad, and then leaves. Now, I don't know about you guys, but last time I looked at myself in the mirror, I did not look like a Satanist. At the time, I was wearing like a yellow t-shirt that said "Game On" it. It's like, really? Am I the bringer of doom for your child here? It is a crime to not let your kids enjoy what they're into. Like, this kid was genuinely interested in something that was not video games, that was not TV or movies. It was not sitting on his ass looking at a screen. It's still sitting on his ass, but it's using your brain. This kid was interested in a game that teaches, you know, I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, social interaction, problem solving, math skills, creative thinking, you know, teamwork, uh, utilizing your imagination, not letting your brain go stagnant, having fun, storytelling. But he just said, no, that's not good. That's not good. And the more I thought about this in the minutes after he removed the kid from the store, the more I started getting pissed off about it. And the more I started thinking about how good D&D is for a child's brain. No, it doesn't make them think that fantasy is real. It doesn't make them think that magic is real. Kids are kids. If they're going to think that magic is real, they're going to think that magic is real. You're robbing your kids of fun, of imagination, of creativity. You know, it's like, I'm an adult now. I have a job. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm just like, I'd give anything for magic to be real. You know what I mean? So, like, as a kid, having Dungeons and Dragons, being able to cast spells, being able to fight evil. I mean, that was a gift, and it is a gift still. So, you know, I'm not saying that guy was necessarily a bad dad, but he probably was. You know, I understand that he had this idea of D&D and tabletop gaming in his mind, bred of, you know, misrepresentation and ignorance, and he acted in his kid's best interest. But I really wish he would have stayed and talked to me. I would have had a conversation with that father about Dungeons & Dragons. I would have told him about when I played it as a kid. I would have told him about how I still play it to this day. About how I'm holding down a job, going to school, and I'm a productive member of society, and that I am a better person because of D&D. Not because it changed my life or shaped who I am, but because it gave me some really useful skills. And it kept me, you know, not kept me, but, you know, it's an outlet. An outlet that isn't drinking or fighting or doing drugs, you know. I don't mean to oversell it here. I'm not trying to say that D&D will save your kids from drugs. What I'm trying to say is that it is a healthy outlet. It's having your kids be creative. It's having them solve problems. It may be preparing your kids better for the real world than high school ever could. So, I wish I had had the chance to explain to that dad why it wasn't satanic and why his kid was a bright kid who was looking for something fun to do. I hope wherever that kid is that he someday gets to play D&D. I hope he moves out and goes to college and finds a game group and is able to play the game that he's always wanted to play. So, anyway, guys, that's the end of this tabletop tale. I'll catch you next time. Take care. Happy gaming.